bright and sunny day in Michigan, so I'm grateful for that. Today we have lots of interesting information and lots of team updates. Teams have been really active in the last week, doing a lot of iterations, so I'm really excited to get into cohort business. But to get us started, want to remind everyone that these sessions are recorded. We will not have mic access until it is time for teams to present. And just make sure your speakers are on and up. This is the 6th web session of Cohort, and as a reminder, we have 12, so we're right smack dab in the middle. But don't worry, you're never too late for Cohort. You can always join, you can always participate, and you can always learn. Today, we have the lovely Megan Torrance here to talk about the state of adoption. She'll be speaking about her e-learning guild research and what now and what that means for our industry and for us as practitioners. We'll also do some team check-ins. And today, we're at 463 members in the spring 2020 cohort, which is really, really exciting. Behind the mics, we have our producers, Aaron Stellar and Jamie Washington, and then I'm Jess, and I'll be hosting as always, so let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to use the chat to ask any questions of our speaker or any questions you might have of Cohort, and we'll be sure to get to them. So we've been spending the last 6 weeks getting acclimated with what xAPI is, what it has to offer, and how to use it. We've been talking about broadly how to send data, broadly what xAPI is as a specification, how to send data from e-learning tools, how to send data from things that are not e-learning. We talked about xAPI profile, and that's all about sending better data. We talked about the new e-learning ecosystem. And today we're going to talk about the industry broadly and talk about who's using xAPI, what does this mean, and what's next. Then we're going to get into some tangible case studies, and we have a lot of great folks that will be presenting on case studies they've used. So next week, look out for some of those. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan, who's going to talk about the state of adoption, her e-learning guild research, what now, and share about what she's been learning all over the world, quite literally.
All right. Well, so hi everybody. It's been a few weeks since I've been doing this live, and I have been following along in Cohort and paying attention. The joke around here is I actually watch Cohort videos while I am walking on the treadmill. So I get a little bit of workout and a little bit of treadmill, or a little bit of Cohort. So I've been following along and watching teams in Slack, and I am loving the traction that's going on, and the things that I'm seeing people do. And so you guys are rocking it out. I'm also spending a lot of time talking to people. I've been to a few conferences and whatnot, and really talking about what is the state of adoption? Why is this so hard? Actually, I had a great question yesterday. Like, why aren't everybody using it? So this is a really timely point to be talking about this. So last summer, the e-learning guild asked me to do a research report and find out where the sentiment was, what people were doing with xAPI, and what was going on. We sent out a survey in the beginning of July, collected results for about a month, and got some really interesting insights. And so I want to share with you some of that, but then also get your feeling about it, because you are right in the trenches. Actually, what might be interesting, if you're someone who filled out this survey last summer from the e-learning guild, will you give us a shout out in the chat with just a yes or I did it? If you were on the e-learning guild's newsletter list or email list, you got a message or got an invite to do that. So give us a shout out there. I've got a few demographics things here, and then we are going to dive into some of the results as we go. So we had over 530 people respond to the survey, which was pretty cool. And one of the things that was super important to me was to pull out people who were xAPI providers from the general population of the survey. A lot of these surveys that we see out there have a little bit of, uh, they have a mixture of providers, software developers, and then consumers like you, right? And so I wanted to pull that out because I think that the providers are going to, they have a different perspective, and sure enough, we found out that they did. David, I absolutely love. Yes, right? So if we were recorded, xAPI could know what you did last summer. And since those statements are immutable, we could always find that out. Unless because of GDPR, we needed to obscure your data, right? So we found out that about 18% of the people who responded to the surveys were indeed software providers or services providers to our industry. And so the results, when we look at adopters and non-adopters, right, the results that you're looking at are from people who do not work for organizations that are providing services to this industry. And I think that was really important. We had a good hunk of people, if you look at kind of who responded, right? We had large corporations, we had small corporations and medium corporations. So about 25% of the people who responded to the survey were from large employers. A little bit of higher ed, a little bit of nonprofit, some nonprofit association. I kind of divvied those out. So and some state and local government. And very few on the K-12, right? Which is not surprising because K-12 doesn't tend to overlap in great numbers with the e-learning guild population. And quite frankly, K-12 uses a different set of different set of tools than we do, and a different set of circumstances and a different specification that looks remarkably similar to ours, but is somewhat different. So that's just really from a demographic perspective what that looked like. And then, like we said, we pulled out the providers of learning products. And I've got some data from them in the end of this, but that was really, really important to me that we did that. The good news, almost everyone has heard of xAPI. That was good. And so there's still a chunk, right? There is a chunk that don't know much about xAPI. And I will say, admittedly, as much as they're like, woohoo, 80% of the people have gotten the message, I will say if there's 20% of the people who actually clicked the button that said, take a survey on the state of xAPI, and they didn't even know what xAPI was, there's probably more people who are like, I don't know what xAPI is, I'm not going to click that button. So admittedly, it's probably larger than this. We all have more work to do. But this was a good, just kind of a first glance, to what extent are you using it? And this graph, right? So I took this information that was interesting, that didn't, I was like, okay, data, right? Then I graphed it. And so here's something really, really interesting. And I'll tell you kind of what was going through my head last August as I was writing this up. Because at first, right, I'm looking at these numbers, right? Fewer than 5% use xAPI for everything. Fewer than 5% have more than 5 xAPI projects. And when I said xAPI projects, I meant an in-production project, not a prototype, not a proof of concept. An in-production project. Slight more than 5% have 5 or more, right? And then we have this chunk, right, about 15-ish% that are doing xAPI experiments. I considered them xAPI adopters. And by the way, that's you guys right here. Woohoo! You're all in this pile somewhere in there. Look, through the animation of the little arrow. Right? So this is really, really interesting. And I'll be honest, right? Jess and I and Peter and Allison, right? So we've had We've been running xAPI learning cohorts now. This is the 10th cohort. And by the way, when I tell people that out in the world, right, I went to London to the Learning Technologies Conference, and I said, hey, yeah, we're on our 10th cohort. And people are like, you've done 10 of these things? And then they say, and they're for free? Yes, right? So I feel like we've been talking about this. xAPI has been out for 7 years now. We've been talking about this over and over and over again, and we still have these little tiny numbers in here, right? But here's the thing, right? Technology adoption is always slower than it seems. So if you're one of those people like, poof, learning analytics is all of a sudden it's here, it's disruptive. And actually I was with Trish Uhl yesterday at a conference, and learning analytics has actually been around for about 30 years, right? And it's been doing this long, slow adoption curve tail in, right? What's really, really excited, right? What's really, really exciting to me is this pile. There are 45% of the people out there who are interested. They know what it is. They're just not using it yet. They have not yet adopted xAPI, but they know what it is, right? And that's really, really exciting to me. Like, that is where we are. So that means all of you here in this, oh, do I have drawing tools? I do have drawing tools. Oh, this is going to be my favorite day on the cohort, right? So all of us, right, here in cohort, we're all in here, right? These people are coming, and they will need our help. We are the ones who are doing the projects, inspiring them, writing articles, sharing code, pushing the envelopes with inside our organization. So this is really, really, really exciting to me. And it's not just because I did have a Mountain Dew before I came here. So let's talk about, right, what this looks like. Among the non-adopters, right, we asked them some questions. So we asked different sets of questions of non-adopters, adopters, and providers. So among the non-adopters, right, we had some who don't know what xAPI is. We have, get this, right, we're interested but haven't used it. That's a big, big, exciting number, right? And then we asked them, right, why haven't you, right? What are the barriers that exist? Right, so I just zoomed in on the top barriers. Lack of knowledge or skills, right? A lot of it, and we allowed people to select all that applied here, right? There was a lack of identified need, lack of time, lack of buy-in, lack of participation. Most of the rest of these things, right, really come around that if the organization felt a compelling need to do this, these things would not be barriers. They would exist. So, Michael, your question about, are these xAPI projects that are really writing xAPI statements or just tools publishing in tin can? My sense is that these are actual projects that are writing xAPI statements, because I have taken the tools providers out of this. Right, so this data set that you're now seeing in the last couple of slides are people who work in organizations, not consultants and software providers. Right, so I pulled them out, and that's precisely why. Okay. So that was super exciting, right? So I asked people, right, what's going on here? And there were some interesting stories, right? What I'm going to do is, rather than read these to you, because you could read them, Jamie, can we turn on drawing tools for everybody? And then what I'd like everybody to do is to take your mouse or your pencil and make a scribbly mark next to the things that seem like they resonate for you. Like, yeah, my organization has this problem too, or I've been in this spot. So once you all have drawing tools, and this is the beauty of Adobe Connect, that we should be able to do that. All right, do we have drawing enabled yet? Enabled, okay. So everybody should be able to go out, click the draw button at the top of your PowerPointy looking window, You should get a drawer off the left, and you can start scribbling. Get ready for some scribbly chaos. You know that's where the fun is, though, Sam. Okay, so Joan, excellent, right? So what I'd like you to do is read read these paragraphs that were submitted by people during the survey, and give me a scribble next to it, an underline of something that's meaningful for you, something that resonates in you for your work. Like, yeah, we had that problem too. And yes, those of you who are kind of drawing pictures and stuff, thanks for doing that off the side and kind of not getting in the way of the folks who are kind of responding to our conversation here. Right, so it seems like a lot of these are common things, right? We are moving so fast, right? We are doing so many things at once as L&D professionals that trying to add more might be tricky, right? There are a lot of technologies changing within our organizations, and just project overload and personal bandwidth. Totally get it, right? And that's where I want to put a shout out to all of you who are making a commitment to your own professional development by doing this, right? Interested, but getting the okay to use software within our organization is hard. Absolutely, right? So having all of your ducks in a row, if you work in an organization that is lucky enough to have they call them like the Saint Bernards, right? The security Saint Bernards who are there, they're watching, they're making sure that we're keeping things clean. And they're good for us. They do slow things down sometimes for a good reason, right? And then simply sometimes needing to spend money makes it hard. So let's move on. As we look at, and I'm going to ask you to put your drawing pens away, we'll bring them out later. Right? So then we said, what are people doing to get ready for xAPI, right? What are people doing? And if you squint your eyes in real close, this has both the adopters and the non-adopters, right? Adopters and non-adopters. And so take a look at this data, right? And this is interesting, right? And Doug says not everyone has a use case. Well, let's talk about that, Doug, because I think that there are a lot of instances in which people, if they knew there was something more available to them than SCORM, they would find a reason for it. And to use it. I think there's a certain amount in our business sponsors and in our own profession of learned helplessness around data. So we're going to talk to that. I'm so glad you said that. So let's take a look here, right? We have the ability, right? We have learning through experimentation. That is exactly what we're doing here, right? Learning through informal means. Right? And reading articles and creating prototypes, that's what we're doing. Take a look at the difference in size between adopters and non-adopters as far as people who are trying it out. Right? That's pretty darn cool. There are some folks, right? How do you prepare? I am preparing by preparing my internal stakeholders, right? I'm evaluating vendors. I'm submitting budget requests, right? They are getting ready to do this. So this was really, really interesting for me. I will put a shout out here. I'll put a shout out here for a couple of ways to learn about xAPI that I wanted to kind of call out to you. Oops, you know what, Joan? I was looking for the eraser also, and or Teresa, can't find it unfortunately. That's okay. Don't worry about it. Couple things, right? Reading articles and information online, right, and attending conferences, right, and informal means of learning. Okay? How many of you, okay, put a yes in the chat, how many of you have read an article in Learning Solutions magazine or taken a Udemy course and in order to learn about xAPI? So go ahead and type in the chat. Jess, you count too, right? LinkedIn Learning. You know what? I think, J-Rock, that's a philosophical question. I think they're structured as formal courses, but if you go out and grab them yourself, then and nobody's telling you to, I think that you can count that as informal, right? So here's the thing, right? You're watching YouTube videos, you're reading articles, you're asking people, you're learning stuff, right? Now, pay it forward. Take what you're doing here, submit a conference presentation. Take what you're doing here, do a demo fest at DevLearn or Learning Solutions. Take what you're doing here. Learning Solutions is always looking for more articles, and share your story. Share your story on LinkedIn. I will tell you, you get a lot of traction on LinkedIn, right? Share your story and be that that inspiration for someone else. And actually, thanks, John, because you for calling that out. You can get your DevLearn proposals in by tomorrow. So that's awesome. And even if you don't get your conference proposal in, even if that seems a little daunting, Learning Solutions and DevLearn conferences have a demo fest. Right? That's a super easy entry, and then you get to share your story with a lot of people and be that inspiration. But then I'll also tell you something, because I've done Demo Fest a lot, it's a fantastic opportunity to learn from others, right? You're sharing your story and people say, well, hey, what if you did this and this and this? And like, that's a really good idea. And you kind of park that away. So I'm going to completely recommend that to all of you in terms of professional development. Okay. So let's take a look here, right? Among those non-adopters, okay, most of them plan on implementing xAPI in the next 1 to 3 years. So if you look at that gigantic wave, right, that gigantic wave of people who are interested but haven't started yet, they're coming. They are coming. This was super exciting to me. Okay. So we then asked, what are the most likely places you'll start using xAPI when you go about doing that? And so this really kind of validated some of my ideas going in, as well as validated the kinds of projects that we see coming through Cohort, right? Where's the first place people are going to start? They are going to start with e-learning and LMS data. Why? Because you already have those tools. That makes it super easy. You don't have to, right, have a, you don't have to get new budget request. To get started here, you already have those tools. You don't have to go outside of your space. So Luke asks, is that because the e-learning dev tools are getting better at supporting xAPI? You know what? The e-learning dev tools, almost every single one of them has an xAPI publish option that allows them to send xAPI data. And as we've been discussing, some of them send great data. Some of them require JavaScript in order to send great data, and some of them send pretty bland and boring data, right? Basically SCORM in xAPI format. But those are a really great place to get started. Okay? The next place that people are looking at using xAPI, right, happens to be, right, these sets of things that we set up for people. Okay? We're setting up learning for people. Okay, still within the learning space, I'll even include hands-on, right? That are really logical places to get data from, but that we've never had access to any of this data alongside our formal learning data before, right? So, and in fact, if we even go all the way down here, all of these are tools that are within the realm of the learning space, right? They're easy to go and get. The other ones, right? Some of the interesting stuff, right? There are folks who are out there getting external data sources, either outside of the L&D team or outside of the organization. You know, look, some of the other write-in places, in some cases, I'll be honest, the write-ins included things that I would put in some of these other lists, and then some of them were really, really random bits of information that didn't seem meaningful to pull out in that other. So I think that there's some really interesting stuff here, right? It makes logical sense. Start with the tools you have, then start with the tools that are within reach, and then you go out further than that. So I thought that was really interesting and plays out, right? Then, right? Those are the right. So what are we doing? We asked, what are the adopters up to? So among all the people that are adopters, so 124 people responded, right? Lots and lots of people prototyping, okay? And some people actually using it all the way. So let's take a look, right? What did they do to prepare? Okay. Oh, we already had this part. And then we said, right, where do you store your xAPI data? Most of them are using an external LRS of some sort, either, right, in fact, the vast majority, an external LRS of some sort, with a smaller percentage of people who are using an LMS with an integrated LRS. Okay. And Luke, yes, some people did write in xAPI Cohort as a starting place. What we tried to do, we really wanted this to be as, I didn't want to lead the question, right? So I didn't ask any of that around. I wanted to see what people said. And so, yes, a lot of there were some shouts out for sure of Cohort in this. So I wanted to, as we look at, right, as we look at kind of where people are storing their data, I wanted to take a moment and actually show some slides that I think I showed earlier, this cohort, because I've also seen some questions. I get a lot of, this is like question number one that I get out at conferences. I've seen this bubble up in the cohort Slack, and I just wanted to kind of call some of this out here. Okay, so there are learning record stores that stand alone from a learning management system. They stand next to or without one, right, that allow you to go out and send their data, and you can do that right now. So I'm going to ask a question. Let's turn on your drawing tools and put a circle around the LRS, put a circle around any LRS that you have actually used, not heard of, actually used. So David, the Moodle plugin and the LearnDash plugins send data. They are not the learning record stores that receive the data. So go ahead and put a circle around any LRS you have used. Getting lots and lots of circles. So yeah, right. So David, this is exactly why we're having this conversation. And Doug, yes, we use Saltbox too. I was sad to see them go. I thought they had a lot of really interesting things going on. Doug, you're dating yourself there, though, right? You've been in the club a long time, right? So there are several options out there. There are some that are newer, and then there's some bastions that have been around for quite a while. So those are the LRSs that you can go out, and these receive your data. Okay. There then are some LMSs, fully functional, full-scale enterprise LMSs that have an LMS inside. So, for example, The team that is the Team Storyline LMS has access to the UL LearnShare LMS. It is a fully functional enterprise scale LMS that has a learning record store fully functional inside of it. Duncan Welder and Art Working Team from RISC speak at almost every cohort. They're from RISC. They have that too. Saba has the, you have to pay for the upgrade. Okay. But it's there. I don't know much about the Fox or the Meridian ones, and the OnPoint and RISC. Really, those they have been in the xAPI club from day one. Okay, so someone just asked, added Xyleme, and I have Xyleme on a different page, and we can talk about this because I'd love to know your experience a little bit more. And yes, Cornerstone just bought Saba last week, and they have not yet announced, as far as I know, their plans as far as integration, whether they will maintain 2 boxes, and we have, and it's still too early, right? So Absorb LMS can handle xAPI courses. All right, so let's talk about what it means to handle xAPI courses. This group handles xAPI courses, and so if what we're saying is that, right, we said Absorb handles xAPI. Absorb is not on the list of LMSs that have a conformant LRS inside. Okay. Same thing with Xyleme. Okay. And the Workday does not. You can host a SCORM course in Workday and have it send xAPI out to a separate learning record store. Okay. But this is a list of LMSs, right, that aren't fully conformant. Now, there was some conversation in the cohort Slack, and I'm sorry, I can't remember which team it is, because I surf all the teams, but I don't get nearly as knee-deep in, right, about can I send xAPI data to my LMS? You can only send xAPI data to an LMS that has a conformant or nearly fully conformant LRS inside of it, right? So most of these LMSs may have a non-conformant LRS inside, and one of their chief areas of non-conformance is that they do not accept statements from outside of the LMS. Okay? And I'm actually right now working with Art Working Team on an article on how to evaluate your LMS that says we support xAPI, to ask what that is, right? So there's some xAPI support. These LMSs will let you launch. They will probably read a completion. You may not be able to get all the data, and you don't get data from outside the LMS, which is one of the major points of xAPI in the first place. Okay? Oh, Luke, that is such good news that Cornerstone is supposed to accept statements from outside. So that would be spectacular, right? So, and David's suggestion, right? A mix and match. I consider this a hybrid, right? So running a course, right? Launching a course in the LMS, having that course send a hybrid, send a SCORM statement to the LMS to make the LMS happy. Okay. But then sending xAPI data to an outside learning record store. Domino One actually does that out of the box. You can support a hybrid publish, and you can send it both places, with xAPI or with do-it-yourself JavaScript code, and I believe the eLearning Brothers templates allow you to send a SCORM completion and an xAPI set of data. So that would be, that is entirely possible. I have run, we have run courses like that. And then there are a number of LMSs that send data to your LRS. Right? They allow you to launch, right, and they send their own data to the LRS, but they themselves don't have an integrated LRS. So if you want to use xAPI with these, you most certainly can. You just also need an LRS. Okay, no problem. But it really, really will behoove you to ask these questions when you're evaluating your LMS to say, what do you do? What do you do? As we move off of, and actually, you know what, Luke, I'm going to give you a quick task if you could. Could you open up a channel in the Cohort Slack to discuss LMSs? And then we can start talking about LMS support for xAPI, right? So Sam, I'm with you, right? It's always time to make friends with your IT department. People who are adopting xAPI, right, are making friends with IT. And they will support you, right? All the rest of the people or the departments on this list have data that you may want, or you're building training for them, and in order to build better training for them, you want to know what their data is. Is the training working? How do we measure this? But it is always a good time to make friends with your IT department because they get this stuff. This stuff is not rocket science to them. And they will help you through the security, and they will help, they may even be able to help with some of the JavaScript to support that, right? Can I install our LRS on our infrastructure, please? Right? Well, you know what? I have just recently, right, had this conversation where can I buy new software is generally met with no, right? The business is asking us for learning analytics, and I know how to do it. Can you help me? Is a lot more likely to get a yes. So we then talked to vendor companies, right? In this survey, remember I said 18% of the people that we asked were actually vendors. A lot of them are custom content providers or consulting, and then we had some software and so, you know, we got kind of a good mix of the organization, and it was really, really interesting, right? So take a look at some of these things that the providers said, right? We went from zero data to a lot of very interesting data in 16 weeks, right? 4 months worth of development effort and proof they're up and running, right? Take a look at this, right? This statement here. Where's my magic pen tool? Right? Take a look at this one. What a super cool reason to use xAPI, right? Completely game-changing kind of stuff, right? Providers are very excited. They're getting used to it. I mean, I used to go, I still do. I go up and down the aisles at conferences. I go through the expo, and as I see a cool piece of software, I'll say, hey, does that do xAPI? And 5 years ago, the answer was, lady, we do any APIs you want. Which means, by definition, they weren't doing xAPI, right? Because they didn't know what I was talking about. Now the answer is either yes, or that is on our roadmap. People are finally asking us for it. So that's the right answer, right? That's what gets me excited, including someone, super nice guy from, super smart guy from one of the mobile performance support tools. And he's like, yeah, but we have great visualizations. Yeah, but we have this cool proprietary thing. Yeah, but nobody's asking for it. And last year he came up to me at ATD Technology and he said, I get it now. I want my data where all the rest of the learning data is going to be. Like, bingo! My work here is done, right? This is what gets me excited. But, right? But they're not getting those requests, right? A lot of people out there are still, right, satisfied with the data that they get, right, from SCORM. I'm pretty sure Scott's data scientists would not be satisfied with 5 relatively boring and shallow pieces of data. Okay? So there's still some work to be done out there. Right? People aren't used to getting data from us. They're used to getting data from everybody else, right? Remember, 20 years ago, marketing was a black art. It was too full of science, or too full of art and craft and mystery. There was no data about it. Now, marketing is all about data. All about data. Right? So here we are. Right? Here we are. When we did this survey, right, it was in the early days when we released this. And right, we ended up our fall 2019 cohort with 650. We've already, well, we're past 455 now. But xAPI cohort is really, really driving a lot of industry conversation. And I'm actually going to have the people on this call. So we have, there are, right, so do me a favor, all 43 of you, take your pen tools and mark when was the first cohort you did. So I'm going to put my pen tool there. That's my first cohort. Come on, Jess, get your pen out. Oh, there's mine. When was your first cohort? So do me a favor, can I have one person give me a yes if you can hear me in chat? Okay, got it. Thank you. Sorry, I had a little minor hiccup. Hey, good news. Torrance Learning's getting fiber run to the building. We're going to have better continuity as we go. So thanks, everybody, right? So this is our own adoption curve right here, and this is pretty some pretty exciting stuff. I am going to turn this back over to Jess to finish out the rest of cohort for today, but I will be available online to go ahead and answer questions as needed. So I'm going to let Jess switch over here and do some driving, and I will do.
Awesome, thank you, Megan. So that was really great insights, really great conversation. Thank you for sharing your research and all the awesome work that you've been doing and learning about adoption. And I'm really excited about that curve and what we're able to offer and support folks as they join cohort. So we're going to hop right into some team business and where your team should be and what should be going on, and then also talking about how we can support. So that's what these team updates are for. They're an opportunity for you to share where your team is progressing, where your team could use some help, and also just share some of your wins. So right now we're in week 6, smack dab in the middle of the xAPI cohort. And right now folks are iterating, they're breaking up into different aspects of the work and assigning tasks and really trying again to see where they're going. And I see all of that activity within Slack. So what I'm going to do now is, if you are a team rep who's going to speak on behalf of your team, up at the top of your screen, you have the opportunity to raise your hand. Please raise your hand. And if you are on a call, if you're using the call, then press the asterisk twice, the star twice, and that is going to give you mic access. When I transition my screen over to the GitHub, when I get to your team, what you'll be able to do is update for your team. So I'm going to share my screen, and folks should be able to see the GitHub now. Okay, So we're going to go in order of alphabetical order, even though it's for some reason not alphabetically in order in the GitHub. We're going to start with Team Adaptive Learning. Brady, are you on the line to give an update, or is anyone here to give an update on behalf of your team? All right, seeing as there is no update, we're going to move on to Team Alexa, and Izzy told me that they're not available to talk today, so I'm just going to give this update on behalf of their team. This week, they started writing out their call script and building out the Alexa skill in voice flow. They aren't in need of support right now, and what they hope to accomplish. Oh, Megan, did you want to give your update on behalf of Team Alexa? They're hoping to finish the skill in oh, sorry, Megan, in voice flow, and the team will review the skill and make some usability tweaks, and they're going to start building out the xAPI statement templates. Team Audio Video. Is anyone from Team Audio Video on the line? Jeremy or anyone? Okay, so they had a lot of accomplishments this week where they, okay, Jeremy's not able to attend today. They created a trial account, they captured endpoints, they added xAPI from Rise with video embedded, they added ScoTube via YouTube, they created dispatches, created and hosted a Moodle account. They could not successfully add Watershed.
Well, if you guys can hear me, I can give the Team Pebble update really fast because I have mic access. Okay, we're just annexing it. Team Pebble this week um, didn't do a ton of stuff. We still have those 3 branches. There's xAPI profile creation and the instructional design work on how to use Pebble, and Joanne's ECE project, which is getting the most traction, is going along the most. The one ask I have from people is that Joanne has put in the development Slack group a spreadsheet that she created. The spreadsheet is to help her finalize a template for each of the components that she wants to build. They'll all work off of the same template. So if anyone who understands the code behind things can go in and just take a look and give her an extra set of eyes to let her know if it seems good, that would be much appreciated.
Way to jump in there, Kristen. Can anybody hear Sam?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hey, great. Okay. Well, after PEBL comes PODCAST, hopefully, Team Podcast. And we're in divide and conquer mode. We've been talking about use cases in the last week, which we could really use some of. If anyone has ideas for use cases for data that you would want to have about podcast listening using xAPI, we're still coming up with new things, and we're going back and forth between the statement generation side, creating a profile that is extending existing profiles and meaningful statements, and the LRS side of how it is that things like a podcast feed would be aggregated and made sense as learning experiences on the LRS side, structured. So Oliver Pincus is working on the statement side and leading that effort. And I'm working, as of this week, more on the LRS side, in over my head. And we welcome any help, both with use cases and with how it is that others have solved that problem between where you want the most detailed data. Is that on the statement side? Or if we know about the structure of the learning activities that we're working with, if it's better to keep that more on the LRS side, on the delivery side. So that's what we're working with.
All right, cohorters. I think I got access again. Sorry for that. Next week, we are back here at 2 o'clock p.m. and we're going to see some case study from Duncan, and we're really excited to see that. And then as a reminder, in May, on May 7th, in Michigan and online, you can sign up for the xAPI party. This is a really great and free space to continue your learning. As always, if you have any questions, you can email, Slack, or message me here. Yeah, don't risk missing Duncan. All righty. Thank you. Have a great Thursday. Now get out there and make something.